how do we get everyone engaged? How do we make sure that everyone is included? And the way to do that is to be really simplistic with how we explain things. I always try to encourage people to explain things as if everyone in the room has no idea what they're talking about. The creativity comes in figuring out a solution for certain puzzle pieces that we found which are problems.
When we understand where the customer's coming from or pain points, problems, we can then identify a market to the position product. Welcome to the DevReady podcast, where we're helping non-techs build great tech. Today we're taking one little step at a time and going to probably more incremental improvement in terms of continuous and process improvement conversation. Today I'm joined by Maria, who's been in this space for quite a while, sort of fell into this sort of role and it clicked, and it just felt comfortable for her to look at current process, understand how people work within a framework and how it might incrementally improve. Maria, thank you for joining us on the DevReady podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Andrew.
Now, tell me a bit about you. So I'd love to share from the audience perspective a little bit about your background and yourself and how you're on the DevReady podcast today.
Sure. So I'll take it back to the beginning just to show the progression of how I've come to where I am today. I started off in a children's development franchise where I was kind of an all-rounder, managing, marketing, finance, anything and everything you can think of.
Sounds like working in a startup.
Yeah, it was it was in that space that I really learnt to focus on the customer and the client and making sure that anything that we're doing is aligning to their needs. Then I'll jump ahead to my corporate career. I started off in a customer-facing role where the biggest thing that I learnt is about owning mistakes really quickly and really being upfront with them. One, for personal peace of mind, but then also just it's so important and such a value add to be able to do that and to be able to go back, resolve things, learn things quickly. So that was a big learning from that piece. From there, I moved into a 2-year program where I was in different teams for 6 months at a time. In each of those teams, I was able to do different things within sales, innovation, within project management. But the one that really stuck out the most for me was within process improvement. Once I actually got into that space, I really learned that my brain is kind of wired that way naturally. And so that's what I've been leaning towards. After that, once I was more in depth within the project management space, I learned that that's a giant overlap and it's actually very similar. So right now, I'm working in the project management space as a senior business analyst. I'm supporting the company with providing more frameworks around how they deliver projects, providing support to emerging project managers, and then also providing support to the business and helping them understand how projects run, how projects are going to deliver things that are beneficial for us, and what we can all do to make sure that it all runs smoothly. That's kind of me in a nutshell.
Projects running smoothly is a tricky conundrum sometimes in terms of how you manage those and how you really deliver value across them. I think it's set up at the beginning as well. Sometimes businesses jump into the wrong projects in the beginning, so there's no real value. Even if it's delivered on time, on budget, if it's the wrong solution or wrong project, it doesn't really add any value. It's just a waste of everyone's time. So it's always an interesting place from a PM perspective and what you're actually delivering. Continuous improvement, process improvement, it's simple. Obviously we're improving what's currently there, but there's a method to that. There's not just about jumping in and improving certain things. How would you encourage people to look at what they currently have and then how you might incrementally improve certain things?
Yeah, I think it's really important to start with a big visualization. I'm really big on visualizing what's going on. A lot of the time, if we're just talking about it, we're not necessarily on the same page and it's hard to pinpoint exactly what's going on. So I like to start with a big visualization, whether that's digitally or on like a whiteboard somewhere, just putting everything out there, making sure that we know this is what we start from, this is the trigger, this is the input, these are all of the steps, these are all of the people that do those steps. And once you have that mapped out, it's a lot easier to actually pinpoint where the problems are, because you can say it's almost like a quadrant where you've got rows and columns, and you can say, look, in this row column here, that's how we're having a problem. Once you can see that, then you know what you can address, versus having a process that then leads to a problem and then thinking, well, we need to solve the whole process. It could just be a tiny, tiny thing, a tiny tweak, or one little gear that we have to shift a little bit to get to a result.
And sometimes it's just that little gear. I think the visualization is
Mhm.
critical because everyone's got a different perspective, but putting it on a
Yeah.
board or in some digital frame, a mirror board, or wherever it might be, it doesn't really matter. It's just that visual. All right, how does it sort of look? In terms of getting that too, I think not every business has all their processes clean and documented either. So getting all
Hmm.
stakeholders around that process is important, just to make sure we're actually getting real clarity on, yes, is this exactly what's happening, or are we just guessing here? Sometimes there's a bit of guessing
Yep.
going on if you don't understand what's happening across the business as well. And in when you're in a bigger environment, how do you manage that? So in a small little team, it's probably easy to unpack a process, but large scale, a bit more corporate, what does it look like? How do you actually really unpack a process?
So I've been in rooms with maybe 20 people from a team or from a
Well,
process
okay,
that there's touch points with all of them.
yeah,
And I guess a way that you do that is making sure that everyone is aligned. First of all,
mm,
making sure that people know why they're in the room, they know why it's important, and they have an interest in being in that room and making an improvement to this space. That actually was a really beneficial thing for us to do, because you have people that are involved in certain steps of the process that other people don't know about, that maybe changes to their piece is going to affect those first people. So, from my perspective, it's more about just getting that initial buy-in and making sure that everyone knows why they're here and wants to be here. Once you've got that down, then it's just a case of really brainstorming, getting it all out there. People have so many different ideas. And once we can see that on, I guess, one wall, as we would do it on a giant whiteboard, it's then becoming kind of like a puzzle. So you've got all of these different puzzle pieces. Some of them are already there, some of them are coming in as fresh ideas, and you can move things around on the board. It's so much easier than just having a conversation where you can jump from thing to thing. Once you have it on the board, it's literally like a map. Like it is a process map, but you can also think of it as a road map. Like you would use a map to get from point A to point B. It's exactly the same thing. Once you can see the location, it's a lot easier to get everyone to work together and really understand what's going on.
I think puzzle roadmap is quite interesting. I've never heard from a roadmap perspective. Yes, you're here and you're trying to get to here. It's a fair point. A process is
Hmm.
delivering an outcome from the beginning. So I've never sort of heard it framed that way. So, yep. So when you're looking at this roadmap, we can obviously see many parts, inputs, outputs, people in the process. Um, where might you look for areas to focus on a particular area of the process? Because there could be 100 points, right, or 100 steps in a process, depending how big complex it is. What sort of drives you to go, okay, we need to focus on this area?
Yeah, so once you have it mapped out, you did say 100 steps in a process, which is
Yeah.
it's bringing up a bit of a red flag in my mind. So within the
Probably too many.
process,
Yeah.
way too many. Yeah.
Yeah.
Within the process
Yeah.
space, there's kind of a rule
Yeah.
to keep it up to 10
Yeah.
steps. And the
Okay.
way that I see it is almost
It's
like
clearly
a,
not a process guy over here. Yes.
no, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
The way that I see it is kind of like a pyramid.
Mm.
So if you were to see the company and what the company does, that in my mind is the highest level of process. And then you can drill down through all of those different steps. So you can say, like, this company's role is to sell software products. Okay, great. So then within that, you've got the marketing team that's going to promote those products. You've got the sales team that's going to sell those products. So there's different layers that get through from that main process. And when you drill down, you actually get to the finite operational, like click this button, go to this page, like wait for this to show up, that kind of thing. So once you can drill it down and distill it into processes that are about 10 steps long, then you can actually pinpoint where those issues are happening, and you can see what the critical piece is. So if you look at a giant process, you might see like 20, 50 problems, and that's just unaddressable. But if you drill it down and just see, okay, in this process, this particular thing is a problem. So we're going to go to the next level. What happens in those levels? If there's three processes that lead up to that first process, which of those three is causing the problem? And then you can distill it down from there.
Now, what defines a process? Because they can obviously interchange and or
Mm-hmm.
go from one to the other. What defines a process? What's from start to end? What does it look like?
Mm-hmm. The way that I would define a process is something that has a start and a finish. It has an input and a clear output. That's the kind of the basic definition that I like to use for all processes.
Yeah, so yeah, unpacking across. All right, we've got a clear start, clear finish, a number of steps in the middle, um, and inputs. So inputs could be from another process clearly,
Yep.
and you're chaining. Yeah, understand. Now it can be a creative space as well in this area. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just documenting steps, right? Because we are evolving and innovating within this, and that's what the improvement side comes from. So, how does one bring creativity to this? Is it just bringing a bunch of stakeholders to a room and similar to designing out anything? We're in a design space. How does it look? Do you use design principles? What does it look like?
Yeah, so a lot of the creativity comes from some of the solutions that we might come up with. So if we find that there's a puzzle piece in this process which is not working, we're going to take that puzzle piece out, we're going to refine it, we're going to think of more solutions, and we're going to bring it back in and see if it fits. So I find that the creativity comes in figuring out a solution for certain puzzle pieces that we found which are problems, and having people work through that. And a lot of the time, people already have solutions in their mind. It's just a case of testing and seeing, is this actually going to work for the purpose that we need it?
And then, like you said before, is it going to cause problems around other
Mm-hmm.
steps in process or create
Yeah.
other issues for other people along the chain as well? So it's off camera. You mentioned a little bit around how do we humanize everything because this
Mm-hmm.
can be pretty step by step is not the way everyone thinks,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of detail. How do you manage that in terms of how do we get everyone on the same page and ensure that we are delivering something that everyone's on the same page of and it can add value to, and not
Mm-hmm.
just sit in the corner and probably just not speak up because they're a bit lost.
Yeah. Yeah, so I see this in a few different ways. You can kind of picture it if 10 people walked into a room and they all had like a green light on their above their head that's like online. Everyone's online. And then someone stands up and start to explain something that might be a little bit technical. And so you can kind of see people's green lights turning red, 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 red. So there's some people that are probably going to understand, but a lot of people may not. And
Hmm.
it always brings me back to thinking about school and let's say being 10 years old in the playground and you see that one person that's sitting out that's not engaged with anyone. And my thought is always, how do we get everyone engaged? How do we make sure that everyone is included? And the way that I think it's really important to do that is to be really simplistic with how we explain things. I always try to encourage people to explain things as if everyone in the room has no idea what they're talking about. How would you lay the groundwork for that? How would you set up the scene so that everyone can join on this ride? Everyone can be involved, no one is excluded. Because if people start to misunderstand, they might not even know that you're not on the same page. They might think that like we're on the same page, like this is all great. And then 10 steps down the line, you realize actually we weren't on the same page because it wasn't simple enough for everyone to be on the same page, if that makes sense. So, from that perspective, being really simplistic with all of the explanations before we go into the details is really important.
Oh, it's like everything. Yeah, if someone's sitting in the corner doesn't really understand where we're going, they might disconnect, and then
Mm-hmm.
they may have one little critical piece that is missing, but they
Yeah.
can't put it forward because they're thinking about what does that mean, and they're a bit lost in the
Mm-hmm.
conversation. So, yeah, how do we bring everyone on the journey? As in terms of your process improvement levels, you may involve customers too in some facets of these conversations. So it has to be even simpler again because it's not a part of the business. It's even in that space. How do you
Mm-hmm.
involving customers in process improvement? Is that something that you would do in your experience?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to involve them even before you involve them, if that makes sense. And I'll
Okay,
elaborate on
explain.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So the way that
You're gathering information maybe about things before you're actually specifically asking questions, may potentially,
yeah,
but
and
go for it. Yeah. Yeah.
hypothesizing quite a bit as well. But the way that I see it is a lot of the time when we're working on something, whether it's a process or a project or anything, you can have so many different scattered ideas and it can get overwhelming. So what I like to do is to go all the way forward to the customer interaction. Let's say like you're building an app for something and we'll have a little character called Emily just for fun. So Emily is looking to find something to help her meal plan and to use up all the food in her fridge. So let's say Emily opens up her phone, she looks up an app. Okay, so if she's looking for your app, what does she need to type to find your app? Or how do you make sure that your app is discoverable by what she's authentically going to type? From there, let's say Emily opens up your app. How many clicks does she have to do to get through to actually the useful piece for her, which is making sure that she can use all the food in her fridge? Things like that. So, from my perspective, going through the journey of the customer, even from a very high level perspective or from a non traditional way in a very quick fashion puts everything into perspective because you now you know where all of the different pieces fit in. Now all of the thoughts that you have in your head have a location. It's like, oh, okay, this happens first, and then we have to figure out how that app works, and then we have to figure out is it going to be iOS or Android or both, and then we have to figure out do we need any APIs to be set up. So all of those thoughts they become in a certain order. Now it's all sequential. So it makes it a lot clearer. And in my perspective, if you can really animate the way that any persona that you're thinking about could react to things, like would things really excite them if they see like the letters bubbling up when they first open up the app? Or is there,
It's amazing how something so simple, but yeah, it looks
Mhm.
simple, but it's not as simple as it
Yeah,
sounds. How do we engage people? It's difficult
yeah.
in a world that's so all-encompassing and digital all around us. It's engagement is difficult now. It's becoming a lot more complex, but I think it's something you mentioned critically there is understanding what they're going to be searching or asking or problems that
Hmm.
the customer's having is the path to get engagement. Because if we attract from that end, we can actually start to filter on how we communicate. When we understand where the customer's coming from or pain points, problems, we can then identify a market to them, position product, like you said, and then understand the
Hmm.
journey of how they're going to work through. But if we don't understand that, we're just building stuff for building's sake. And some of the biggest problems that happen in tech is a lot of people just build things and they don't think about how are we going to engage or how are we going to
Hmm.
connect. And I think it's critical. And you mentioned something simple as bubbling up, how people feel as well is critical to when they're engaging. So some interesting points there that you mentioned. In terms of, I noticed that you're a part of the StartMate community. What drew you to that community, Maria? I saw that on your LinkedIn. What brought you into that community?
Hmm.
Was it a learning thing or was it giving back? What was it for you?
So my friend actually was part of one of the fellowships and he recommended it to me. And then I saw that there was a women's fellowship and I thought that would be a really great experience to jump in and meet a lot of new people that are really focused on entrepreneurial endeavors and kind of have that mindset, have that drive and that passion. So I really wanted to be surrounded by that type of community. That's the biggest reason that I joined that fellowship and then was at several events through that as well. I just thought it would be really great to be a part of a community like that.
In terms of joining that entrepreneurial mindset, what has that given for you to take into a corporate role? What's does it give you some different perspectives on how you might approach things in within your role?
Yeah, so a lot of people, when they're in that entrepreneurial space, they have more of a fast-paced mindset and more of um, looking at the customer and focusing on what they want, kind of like what I was saying with Emily opening up that app. They kind of see things more in that fashion.
Hmm.
And so bringing that back into the corporate space is more of that focus, aligning people to see that specific perspective and then having everything else come on as an add-on. Versus like you were saying, having all these things that we want to build, but then you build it and then is it really helping anyone?
Yeah, there's a lot of that happens when you're building technology. The 20% of the
Mm-hmm.
product gets used and the rest of it can get a little bit lost. Yeah, we just got to be
Yeah.
conscious when we're building. What are you seeing in AI? It's everywhere now. It's every business is saying, let's just throw AI into everything, especially in process improvement. You'd see some
Mm-hmm.
opportunity here. Um, how are you finding AI within big business and working within that environment? And how are you starting to engage that into some of the process improvement spaces or in certain different areas across the business?
Mm-hmm. So at this point, the AI that I'm utilizing is more around day-to-day support, almost like a personal assistant. From a process and project perspective, we are looking to see if we can build different dashboards, have the AI pull certain data for us and showcase that to us in real time. That's going to be a big help for the business in terms of seeing where we're going, how much resource we have, are we on track, and all of that. So the pieces that would have been a manual report that would take hours and hours, we're looking to automate that through AI and see what kind of capabilities we can
Mm-hmm.
introduce to help us do that.
Yeah, it's, you mentioned assistant there. I think that's a really good place for people to begin because that's the
Hmm.
first thing that we can engage in. How does it help us on our day to day? What sort of tools are you using, or are you just using specifics, just the general chats, or you're using specific tools in PM space?
So for within the company, I guess there's only one approved AI to be used, and I found that across multiple companies that Copilot is kind of the go-to. It seems like the data piece on that is kind of really strong, and that's the AI of choice. For my personal use, I use Perplexity AI mainly for
Mhm.
aesthetics. I really like
Yeah.
just the
A lot
aesthetic
more
of it. I
visual. You mentioned visual a bit
Yeah.
for you. Yeah,
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And
yeah.
some of the main things that I use it for, especially, is if I'm in any space of like analysis paralysis, where there's just so much going on and I need a little bit of clarity or direction or support, I'll plug in certain things into the AI and get it to generate almost like a colleague to banter with and to go back and forth with to see, okay, well, once the AI tells me this, now I actually can think that through and I might not agree or I might agree, but now I have that extra perspective to bounce off with. So I use it quite a lot for that, just to have something to bounce off, especially when you're working on something, you can get so in depth with exactly what it is that you're doing that you could lose perspective. So I use it to bring back the perspective.
Yeah, it's good to get different perspectives. I agree, and opinions. Perplexity is a lot more visual, which is a quite more.
Hmm.
Yeah, as you mentioned, so in Copilot, yeah, it does sit nicely because of the data protection side, and it's a lot more embedded in
Hmm.
the environment. So that's the advantage in terms of if you would compare Copilot to Complexity, what variation would you see? How much are you using? Would you use Perplexity more, or would you use Copilot just because you need to?
So I would probably
Mm,
experiment a little bit. I know there's a lot you can
mm,
do with Notebook LLM, and you can kind of
yeah.
insert different sources and have it be very specific in terms of the information it's giving you. That's something that I would want to explore more in terms of like from a business side. I do use that sometimes just for personal use, but there's not too much that I've found to use it for yet. But it is really useful to have it be kind of a closed source where you have just a specific pool of information it's pulling from.
And when you mentioned reporting around AI, with AI, what's
Hmm.
the thought bubble there? So, how are you following that bouncing ball in terms of reporting? Uh, is it just extrapolating, pulling data, and being agentic sort of style, or what are you thinking in terms of internally how it might assist in reporting? I find that fascinating as to what areas you're jumping into.
Yeah, so I would say yes and. So we do want
Yeah,
to
yeah,
have it do the reporting
yeah.
piece on behalf of a lot of people so that we're not manually
Okay.
pulling data. And in
Mm.
addition to that, we'd want it to be analyzing some of the new project ideas that would be surfacing from the business. So we'd want to have some kind of apples to apples comparison. A lot of the time, when you have people coming forward with a certain idea, they're going to explain it in the way that makes sense to them. But really, if we want to compare it with other projects and see which one could bring us more revenue or more return on investment or any of that, we'd want to have something to compare apples to apples. And so we'd want the AI to help us do that. Whether that's prompting the
It's
person inputting the information to use certain quantities or to put it into a certain formula, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point, apples to apples, because especially the bigger the business, when we've worked across enterprise organisations, you'd have someone in New Zealand working on something completely the same as someone in Melbourne, and then someone in Europe, same thing. So when
Mm,
you get global scale, it does happen quite a bit. How do you bring that all together and unpack it,
yep.
and really understand, are we putting our energy in the right places, or are we double, triple handling, or doing things over and over and over again in different ways? Because one of the things is, if people are working in the same environments, they're going to see similar problems. And then
Yep.
they're going to look to solve those problems in different ways, unique ways, and what's the best way to do it. But everyone's just working to a solution for their needs rather than holistically as you get bigger as a business. So
Mhm.
there's quite a bit of that that occurs. It's interesting frame how you're looking at it.
Yeah, definitely having a
Yeah,
dashboard and
yeah,
having, again, that
mm,
visualization, bring it all together. There's one place where people can go to see exactly what's going on. If they do have a thought or an idea or a project they want to bring up, they can see if something's actually happening in that space already, instead of just kind of sitting in a corner and let's work through this and then we'll report back once it's done.
Now, Maria, just for you, what excites you about process improvement? What's is it, the working and unpacking and problem solving? What gets you up in the morning? What gets you going in this space?
So what excites me is, I think, as I mentioned, my brain just seems to just naturally be wired that way. I was speaking to a colleague the other day about like how and why I'm in this space, and I just honestly use it personally as well. Like I'll have a little diagram that I draw out for different like tools in the kitchen. Like, okay, I've got an oven, so I can put that on for 2 hours and have something in there. And then the air fryer can be going with something else that I want to meal prep, and then I can have something on the stove. So my brain just kind of naturally works that way in terms of like an industrial line and multiple
Very
lines and
organized.
seeing what I can do. So it just kind of yeah, it's a natural inclination for me to think that way, and it's fun to bring people on board and to help them see things through that lens because I can see how much it could help them, especially when people are either stuck in their own kind of thought of how to fix something, or if they're having trouble getting through to other stakeholders. Bringing something like process improvement to the space can really help everyone to see exactly what's going on and then move through all the pieces together. So in my mind, it's just something I'm naturally inclined to that I like to share with others because I can see how it can help them.
No, brilliant, Miriam. I want to say thank you for joining us on DevReady podcast today. Good to unpack a little bit around what process improvement can mean at a larger scale, but in reality, it can touch any business, small, medium, large.
Mm-hmm.
As you mentioned at the beginning, if we're building an app for Emily, it's a small scale thing. How do we evolve Emily in the process, and then how do we incrementally improve? Everything we're doing is all about whatever we build or develop or evolve is never going to stay stagnant. That's the reality,
Mm-hmm.
and it can't. It
Yep.
should always be moving and evolving and changing. And then how we do things will always change over time. It's never going to be stable or stagnant. You will die if that's the case as a
Yeah.
business, as an offering. It just that's
Mm-hmm.
not reality anymore. And we're seeing so much movement in process and change because the technology keeps ramping. So it's something that we all must do in every facet, no matter how small, big, or large we are.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate your time and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for joining us,
Thanks.
Maria.
You too.